The wedding hall sparkled with golden lights and the soft hum of violins. Guests raised their glasses, the sweet scent of roses drifting across the tables. I had barely taken my seat when my sister's voice cut through the music like a knife. "She's worthless." The laughter that followed burned hotter than the candles on the table. My sister, Denise, leaned back smugly, her jeweled bracelet catching the light as if she owned the room. Heads turned toward me, eyes filled with pity, others with cruel delight. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. My fingers clenched the napkin in my lap until it crumpled. Across the table, whispers spread like wildfire, feeding the humiliation. Why did Denise hate me enough to shame me here, in front of everyone, and what could possibly silence her this time? Denise had always been the star of our family, at least that's what she wanted everyone to believe. Growing up, she wore the newest clothes while I wore hand-me-downs. At school, she'd roll her eyes at me whenever friends passed by, whispering that I would never amount to anything. I wasn't flashy, and I never cared for show. I studied quietly, worked jobs others thought were beneath them, and kept my head down. My joy came from small victories, fixing things with my hands, helping neighbors when they were in need, and caring for people without expecting applause. But Denise? She craved applause like air. I remember one Christmas dinner years ago, the table lined with roasted ham and cinnamon pies, when she announced to our relatives that she was engaged to a wealthy man. She lifted her ring high like it was proof of superiority. Everyone clapped. She glanced at me with that same smirk she wore tonight, as if to say, "See, you'll never have this kind of life." What she never realized was that I didn't need flashy rings or shallow recognition. I had chosen a life of quiet sacrifice, long nights volunteering at the hospital, extra hours to support causes that mattered, even when no one noticed. My satisfaction wasn't in being celebrated, it was in knowing lives were touched because I cared enough to act. But Denise, she mistook silence for weakness. She thought being overlooked meant being worthless. She forgot that dignity grows in the shadows, waiting for its moment in the light, and now, as I sat in that wedding hall surrounded by laughter aimed squarely at me, I could see the same pattern replaying. Denise, dressed in glittering silver, soaking up attention, eager to put me down so she could shine brighter. The chatter of guests swelled around us, their curiosity stinging my ears like bees. A woman behind me whispered, "Poor thing, always the shadow." Another man muttered, "Why would the family even invite her?" My chest tightened, but I kept my gaze steady, refusing to crumble, because deep inside, I knew something Denise didn't, and tonight, in this very hall, the truth she feared most would finally come to light. The laughter hadn't faded when Denise leaned forward, her voice sharp enough to slice through the violin's melody. "Why is she even here? She brings nothing to this family." The words hit like stones. Conversations paused, and forks clinked softly back onto plates. I felt dozens of eyes settle on me, measuring my worth, waiting to see if I would break. I didn't. I lifted my water glass, my hand steady despite the storm in my chest. I sipped slowly, letting the silence stretch. That silence unnerved Denise more than any outburst could have. Her smile twitched, then grew wider, desperate to keep control. She couldn't even keep a job longer than a season, Denise added, tossing her hair. Always chasing scraps while the rest of us move forward. Pathetic, isn't it? The crowd chuckled uneasily, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The sting of humiliation pressed deeper, but I refused to flinch from. Across the room, the groom's father, Mr. Harrison, watched quietly. His eyes lingered on me, thoughtful, almost searching. I caught his gaze for a second, and he gave the smallest nod, as if to say, "Hold steady." I drew a breath and set my glass down gently, the crystal tapping against the table like a bell. My silence made Denise restless. She wanted a reaction. Tears, anger, anything that proved her superiority. Instead, I folded my napkin neatly, placed it beside my plate, and lifted my chin. Whispers rippled again. Why doesn't she defend herself? Maybe Denise is right. She looks so calm. Why? Denise's smirk hardened. You think staying quiet makes you dignified? It only proves you're nothing. Always nothing. Her words echoed in the golden hall, bouncing off the polished chandeliers, and the crowd leaned closer, hooked on the spectacle. My throat tightened, but not from shame, from the knowledge of what was coming. For years, I had let Denise craft her little stage, thriving on cheap applause. But tonight, in front of this crowd, her spotlight was about to burn out. I glanced again at Mr. Harrison. His lips parted, ready to speak. Denise didn't notice. She was too busy basking in her own cruelty. The room leaned toward chaos, but I sat perfectly still, calm before the storm. The violinist's bow stuttered on the strings as Mr. Harrison suddenly rose from his chair. The room quieted at once. Even the waiters froze, trays balanced midair, as his deep voice carried across the hall. That's enough, he said firmly, his gaze locked on Denise. You mock your sister because you don't know the truth. Denise blinked, startled. The truth? About her? She laughed, hollow and sharp. What truth could there possibly be? Mr. Harrison stepped closer, his presence commanding. The crowd leaned forward, breathless. He placed a hand on the groom's shoulder, then turned toward me with eyes full of gratitude. This woman, he pointed toward me, his voice trembling with conviction, saved my son's life. Gasps rippled through the hall like a sudden windstorm. Glasses rattled against plates as whispers erupted. Denise's smirk collapsed. Color drained from her face, leaving her pale beneath the glitter of her silver dress. What are you talking about? She stammered. Mr. Harrison's eyes never left me. 2 years ago, when my boy was in that accident, no one thought he would survive. But she stayed with him. Night after night, in that hospital, when others gave up. She caught what the doctors missed. Her vigilance kept him alive. His voice broke slightly, then steadied with pride. Without her, I would not have a son standing at this altar today. Silence thundered louder than any laughter. The guests shifted, their faces now turned toward me with respect, awe, even shame for having joined Denise's mockery. A woman dabbed her eyes with a napkin, a man murmured, God bless her. Denise's hands trembled as she gripped her wine glass, her knuckles white. The glass slipped slightly, the sound of crystal against wood sharp in the silence. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I met her eyes, calm and unwavering. For once, she had nothing left to say. The groom rose then, his voice steady. She is not worthless. She is the reason I am alive to marry today. The hall fell utterly still. Respect hung in the air, crushing Denise's arrogance beneath its weight. For a long, aching moment, the wedding hall remained frozen. No one moved, no one breathed. The chandeliers glowed overhead, their light falling now not on Denise's glittering dress, but on me, the sister she had tried to bury in shame. Slowly, the applause began. First a single pair of hands, then another, until the hall filled with clapping that rose like thunder. Strangers stood, their faces warm with admiration. The very crowd that had laughed at me minutes earlier now looked at me as if they were seeing me for the first time. Denise shrank into her chair. Her painted smile had cracked, her confidence shattered. She reached for her napkin to hide behind, but the gesture only made her look smaller. No cruel words, no smug laugh, only silence. And in that silence, her pride crumbled. I rose from my chair, smoothing the folds of my dress with steady hands. My heart was calm, my steps graceful. I had no need to gloat, no need to throw her humiliation back in her face. The truth had spoken louder than I ever could. As I passed the head table, Mr. Harrison caught my hand, his grip firm with gratitude. His eyes shone, and though he didn't speak again, his silence carried more respect than 100 speeches. The groom's smile, humble and heartfelt, sealed the moment. Denise turned away, but I didn't look back. Dignity doesn't need revenge, it leaves arrogance to wither on its own. I walked out of that golden hall with my head high, the sound of applause following me like a wave. The evening air outside was cool against my face, fresh and freeing. The stars above sparkled without judgment, a reminder that respect comes not from the noise of others, but from the truth we carry, and in that truth, I had finally won. Moral: true worth shines when pride fades.